So we are here with Michael Kennedy. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, thank you.
To start, could you just tell us a bit about your journey with epilepsy? So maybe.
Sure, yeah. So I was diagnosed with epilepsy when I was about 15 years old, after I had surgery to remove a brain tumor, and the surgery, after the surgery, scar tissue developed in the area where the tumor was, and that started to, eventually it started to cause seizures.
Okay. And what were the type and frequency of the seizures that you had?
So I had tonic-clonic seizures for about 15 years. It started off not too frequent, just a few seizures each year, and then it progressed over time. So for quite a while it was just a few seizures a year, and then eventually it was half dozen seizures a year, and then it was seizures almost monthly, and then towards the end I was having seizures each week. I even had seizures, 2 seizures in a day. So it really progressed steadily.
Okay. And then can you talk a bit about your treatment pathway and what sort of led you to surgery as a treatment option, so maybe different medications you tried and specialists?
Yeah. So I saw a number of different neurologists, epileptologists, and I tried a whole slew of different medications, at least a half dozen different medications, and none of them were able to actually prevent seizures, or even get consistent, adequate control over the seizures. So that went on for 15 years. I was taking different medications, and I tried different kind of lifestyle changes, but nothing was successful in really altering the frequency of the seizures. And eventually I got to a pretty, it got to, epilepsy can be a very kind of restricting disease that places a lot of limitations on how you live your life. And that's what was happening a lot in the years that led up to the surgery. So I was, I was pretty desperate. I was seeing a neurologist who eventually recommended epilepsy surgery as a potential therapy, and I was excited, but at the same time, this was, it was he explained exactly what it would entail, and it was a pretty major surgery. But I was excited at the thought that, at the prospect, there could be relief down the road. So I left, and eventually I made the decision. The seizures continued, and eventually I made the decision to proceed with the surgery, proceed with at least seeing whether or not I was a candidate for the surgery, because that's the toughest thing, is that 1/3 of people with treatment-resistant epilepsy or medication-resistant epilepsy aren't actually candidates for the surgery. So, so I went to this epilepsy monitoring unit, and they took me off my anticonvulsant medications. You go into the epilepsy monitoring unit, and it's a very nice. They try to make it as nice as it can be, given the circumstances, and it's fitted with leads or electrodes, and monitored for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and basically, the neurologists are just trying to get a read on your brain waves and see whether or not there's a clear seizure focus, an area in your brain where seizures are repeatedly kind of coming from. And I was really lucky because there was an area. It was in my left frontal lobe, and that's where the seizures were starting each and every time.
Okay.
So when I found out that I was a candidate, of course I was excited, but again, I was nervous. So I left, and I thought about the prospect of going back to have the surgery. And about 6 months passed. Seizures were just as bad, if not worse. And I made the decision to proceed with the surgery. So when I got back to the epilepsy monitoring unit, the first procedure was to they had a invasive epilepsy surgery, and what they do is they implant electrodes around the area of the brain that they've already determined is responsible for causing the seizures. In my case, that was the left frontal lobe, where there had been scar tissue that had developed. And then following the surgery, they send me back to the monitoring unit, and during that time, during any seizures that you have after that, they and I had quite a few, they gather really valuable information that allows them to pinpoint exactly where the part of the brain that they need to remove is, the part of the brain that's causing the seizures. So after just a few days, I'd had quite a few seizures, and I was able to proceed with the next surgery, which was when they actually resect that section of the brain. And it was a very successful procedure.
So you had a frontal lobectomy,
Yes.
and you are currently seizure-free.
I'm currently seizure-free, yes.
Okay, wonderful. And was it an easy decision for you to have that surgery after you found out you were a candidate?
I think it's a huge decision, and it's not one that anyone should take lightly. For me, it certainly wasn't an agonizing decision. It wasn't something that I had to agonize over. I was pretty desperate for any kind of intervention that could provide relief. So it wasn't a decision that I made lightly, but it was one that I'm certainly glad that I made.
Okay, wonderful. And so you've talked a bit about what it was like to go through the assessment and the surgery. Can you describe a bit more physically and emotionally what the surgery was like for you?
Sure, yeah. It's I was incredibly fortunate. I had a fantastic support team with me. My family was amazing. My girlfriend, now wife, was there, and everyone in the epilepsy monitoring unit, the nurses, the doctors, the staff, everyone is incredibly supportive. All the other patients, I was there with 6 or 7 other patients. Sorry. I was there with 6 or 7 other patients, and everyone's kind of cheering for each other.
Yeah.
So it's a given the circumstances and the reason, it's nobody wants to be there.
Sure.
But everybody makes it as comfortable as that kind of environment can be.
Sure.
So it was some of the days are long, and I made a lot of friends with other patients and nurses. But you find ways to pass the time.
Sure.
And it's I can't say I look back on it fondly by any means, but it's something that I have zero regrets about doing. It was a life-changing experience, and I think in hindsight, the only thing that I would change is I wish I had known about it as a treatment option earlier in the process, earlier in my in my seizure history, because it really has been an incredible thing, an incredible life-changing experience.
Okay, wonderful. And what was the recovery process like for you?
The recovery process was it was about 3 months, and I took it very easy. I at the time I didn't feel cured. The truth is I didn't feel any different than when I had from when I'd gone in. I think I had a pretty severe headache, but that was about it. Sorry. So at the time, I didn't feel any different after the surgery than I had before. You know, I relaxed. I tried not to take on much stress at all. I tried to eliminate anything that could add any kind of stress to my life. And I was in a fortunate position where, you know, I was able to do that, and I was able to take time off work and just recuperate and focus on that for 3 months. You know, it was there were a lot of doctor's appointments, but it was you know, it was a fairly standard recovery, is the truth. I was just cautious about everything I did. You know, I was quite fragile for a couple of months, and but you know, apart from that, it was a very smooth recovery process.
And what would you say has been the biggest surprise since your surgery? Something you weren't expecting?
Yeah, the biggest surprise since my surgery, you know, I'm able to take on a lot more in life. I'm able to, you know, in terms of responsibilities, I have a job I really enjoy and I work hard. I'm able to, I volunteer with 2 different epilepsy organizations. I'm able to do things like this. I'm able to start to give back to the epilepsy community, a community that supported me through one of the most challenging times in my life. So, you know, epilepsy surgery has, it's provided me with, it's restored my independence and allowed me to live a more fulsome life. And so, you know, I'll be forever grateful to the neurologist who referred me for the evaluation, the epilepsy surgery evaluation, and the neurosurgeon who performed the surgery.
Wonderful. And is there anything you wish you had known before your surgery?
The doctors and nurses, everyone in the EMU is very thorough with their explanations, and you know, this is a potential, this is a possibility, there's a 50% chance of this and 20% chance of that, and 1 in 100 people experience this. So, you know, I don't think anything really came as a surprise. You know, the only thing that I think that I wish I knew in advance was if I could have been made aware of of epilepsy surgery as a potential treatment option earlier on. But apart from that, you know, everything's gone really well.
So no regrets about your sort of treatment pathway, just that you wish you had surgery as an option sooner?
Yes, yeah, no regrets.
Okay, wonderful. And then, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience, or any final words of wisdom maybe for people who are considering having surgery?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's really important to stress that that not everybody will be a candidate for epilepsy surgery. So, you know, everything that I've said is my personal experience, and I recognize that I've been extremely lucky. And so I don't want, I guess I can share what happened to me, and that's not necessarily what another person's experience will be like. You know, the last thing I would want is for someone to consider epilepsy surgery as a potential, you know, see it as a potential cure. And then only to find out that either A, it didn't work, or B, they weren't candidates in the first place to have the procedure. Because that could be devastating.
Sure. And as you said, there's no real cure. There's always, even with surgery, a chance that your seizures will.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I had surgery, but I'm still taking medication. You know, I'm seeing my neurologist right now to taper off the medication, but I'm conscious. I recognize that I may be on medication for many more years or the rest of my life. either way, right now, I'm not living with regular seizures like I was, which has been a pretty incredible experience.
Wonderful. It's a wonderful story. Michael, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for speaking with us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks very much for asking me.